Hello, Youth Lab members. Welcome, Beth Webb, contributing editor to Empire magazine and also co-founder of the Bechdel Test Fest. Beth, thanks for joining us.
No worries.
I thought it might as well make sense to start kind of at the beginning with your career journey, because I know you've done, presenting, journalism, bits and, kind of, there seems to be quite a lot of strings to your bow. So kind of, if you're happy to give a little potted career history, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. I mean, mine was not an easy path into journalism, I won't say, in that I actually worked in finance right through to my sort of mid-20s. I just went to university during a recession, didn't come from an awful lot of money, didn't really believe that I had the chance of doing this thing that I'd always wanted to do. I think there'd just been a lot of voices, whether actual voices or voices in my head telling me that perhaps this wasn't going to happen. And then I got a job at Film 4, running their sort of digital side of things, and I worked with some really wonderful, really wonderful team, a really encouraging team. And through that, just managed to get through the door. It felt like a little slither, and that's all I needed to sort of go, right, I need to get through, and I need to get through right now. And just got my feet on the ground and took it from there. I met the wonderful Karina Antrobus, who founded the Bechdel Test Fest, and started volunteering for them initially. Just loved this idea of celebrating women in film. So I was working at Film 4, I was volunteering for them, and just loving the idea that we had this platform to celebrate women on, and then started to freelance a little bit, write for a few places. I wrote for Little White Lies and a few online outlets, and then just got to know people and knew that I had this opportunity. I knew how hard it had been for me to get there, and decided that I was not going to waste it. So to pitch, and it's not easy at all. I'm not here to sort of say that it's an easy ride whatsoever, and it's a lot of rejections and some not rejections, and some wonderful people that I've met along the way. And then I started writing for Empire, really, and this is perhaps frustrating, but also I hope helpful, just off the back of the editor-in-chief, Terry White, who is, I cannot say enough nice things about her. Like, she is a powerhouse in this industry, and she put a tweet out and just said, we're looking for new writers. And I had nothing to lose, and also had this massive energy behind me at this stage, and dropped her an email. And then fortunately she'd heard of my work through Bechdel, and I started to write for Empire, and haven't stopped and won't, unless they will have to kill me for that to end. And then everything else has just sort of gone from there. It's just a case of being, as David Byrne would be, about being curious and being bold and asking questions and trying new things, and eventually you build a network that's big enough that you can have lots of string to your bow. So you can do broadcast, and you can do podcasting, and also you can do things just completely off your own back. Something that I've learned in this small time that I've been working here is that there are ways you can create opportunities for yourself. So with Bechdel, we had this opportunity to start programming films and put on films in cinemas. And when we haven't been able to do that, this last year, we've launched a podcast, which is something that we've done ourselves, very DIY spirit, very Riot Girl, and just get these filmmakers in, and we get them talking to us. And that's now going to some exciting places. So it's been a while to get here, and it's been really hard. And again, I don't want to say that as a means of discouraging people, but it's also to say that you really can do it with perseverance, and once you're in, just don't let go, I think is the underlying message there.
And when it comes to pitching, have you kind of over the years learnt, or like, do you have kind of do's and don'ts, any kind of things that for you will always do this in a pitch to make sure that it gets, well, comes across as well as you want it to come across.
Yeah, I mean, this came with confidence building, I think, because when I first started pitching, you hear these voices, and you will hear these voices a lot, especially if you're a marginalized writer. It feels, I mean, I'm only speaking as I'm a white woman, so obviously I'm still holding a decent amount of privilege under some people who are starting out, but you'll hear a lot of voices subconsciously or otherwise saying like, what are you doing? You're not necessarily going to get to where you're going. It's too hard. It's too competitive. And so when I first started pitching, they were half-assed. they were a nugget of an idea where I just sort of put it out there and thought, oh, what's the point? They're not going to take it anyway, but I'll send it for the sake of sending it. And then you start to realize that actually, no, you owe it to yourself to do a stand-up job. So actually put in a few paragraphs, talk about what you know about that subject in particular, why you're the person to tell that story, why it's interesting, but also make sure you're saying why it's interesting to the publication. I think a lot of, on the other end, people have too much confidence and are like, well, I want to write about this really niche Russian film that came out 40 years ago and it's really important to me, and Empire, like, that's not that's not going to resonate with our audiences at all. So you have to think about how it fits in with the publication specifically and why you are the person to tell that story, and always include relevant examples of your writing where you can, even if it's not on an official platform. If you've been writing for your own sake, if you've got an online portfolio where you're just writing personally, if you can exercise your knowledge of that subject, just make sure you include it, and they'll be grateful for that, I think.
Great, thank you. I've just got one other question about Bechdel Test Fest, and what have you found are the biggest kind of, I hate the word learns. My mum, as people at work say, what are your main learns out of this? But like, what are the things that you've learned from your experience at at either programming or doing the podcast? Kind of what are you most proud of, and what were the biggest learns?
Learns is great. Learns is fine. Well, this is the time, I think, as well, when you're a freelancer, it can be quite solitary. So when I'm working with Karina and Steph and Caitlin, who are it's the four of us that run it, it is about taking a step back and listening to other people and being very open to learning about new perspectives. That's the really wonderful thing about a collective, is the ability for them to open up your perspective on things and learn about artists that you might not have heard about, and means of working as well. Like, I say that Karina is like a human Barocca. Like, she is just this like effervescent, like relentless stream of energy, and I've learned so much from just being around her. And then Caitlin and Steph and their passions and being able to do that, it's fun as well. I think also because we don't really get a lot of money from it, you have to really enjoy it and love it, and allow the room to do that, and just get whatever you can out of it. And I think it also has just strengthened my relationship with the cinema. I mean, we were already pretty serious at the stage that I joined Bechdel, but there is something about programming, about, I have a really specific memory, actually. We put on Moonstruck, which is the film with Cher, and I mean, I don't need to say it's Moonstruck. And I remember putting it on at a wonderful cinema called the Genesis Cinema in East London. And I popped out for the loo and came back in, and just to hear everybody in that cinema, it's the bit where Nicolas Cage is yelling at his wooden hand, which is a very specific reference if you haven't seen it, and I apologize, but he's yelling at his hand in this really maniacal way, and the reaction from this crowd was so warming and thrilling and great. And I think it's just a testament as well. I mean, Karina worked incredibly hard to get this off the ground, but it just shows what you can do off your own back, and not to be deterred by what's perceived to be a lack of opportunity or limitations. You really can. I mean, if you've got a few local cinemas and a really strong idea of what you want to do, try it. I'd say if you've got friends or you've got people in mind that you think, I'd love to collaborate with them and do something like this, you can try it. You won't get rich, you won't make a lot of money out of it, but it's just such a nice exercise out of what you can do if you really want to do it. And I mean, this isn't why I went into it, but I have got work off the back of Bechdel. I mean, part of the reason that Terry took me on at Empire was like, oh, you're Beth, I know the Bechdel test first, of course. So it's also a nice way of doing that as well. I mean, that's not a guarantee, but it is, it's really useful, and it's fun, and it's lovely, and a good way of asserting some control in a very mad industry.
Well, thank you ever so much. That's really insightful. So yeah, thank you for sharing that with the Youth Lab. Cheers, Beth Webb.
Thanks so much, Jenny. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, they can do. Just if you want to get in touch somehow, I'll always be happy to talk.
Amazing, thank you.